I hope that you had an amazing week and you're looking forward to today's learning. So I see Flora Kaleli saying, hi, thought it's my settings. No. Yeah, unfortunately, Peggy, I'm just alone. Imagine. I need to rethink my life. Who is this? Lillian Kanyangi says, thanks very much. All is good. Kipnianov Vincent. Okay. There's no sound completely. It's now fully blank. Okay. I hope you can hear us now. Just confirm that you can hear me on the chat. Okay, I see thumbs up. And Lillian says Hawiko's awesome. Excellent. I am really happy to hear that. So thank you very much for joining us. And Yoeri Magumba says it's also clear. Thank you very much for the feedback. And so we are very, very excited to have you tonight. So thank you very much for joining us. My name is Grace Nzula. I'm an HR consultant and trainer with Atara Solutions. Atara Solutions is a HR consulting and training company. We offer what we call HR manager outsource for organizations who are outsourcing their businesses. We also offer HR consultancy. If you're looking for somebody to support you in job evaluations, HR audits, organization restructuring, policy development or upgrade, then you need to get in touch with us. We also offer talent sourcing. So if you're looking for talent, be sure to get in touch with us. We are going to walk the journey with you or partner together in talent sourcing. And of course, learning and development, where this program falls under. This is Get It Right with Atara Solutions. And we provide end-to-end training solutions for you, including coaching, team building, and mentorship. And we also come to your organizations. If you want us to train your team members, we are able to do that. If you want us to accompany them to an out of office engagement, we are also happy to support you in that. And yeah, we that is what Atara Solutions is about. And yes, like I said, if you're joining us for the first time, you are on Get It Right with Atara Solutions. Get It Right with Atara Solutions is a webinar series that seeks to demystify issues in employment and entrepreneurship. We do this every Tuesday from 8 o'clock. We've been doing this for the last 6 or so years. We are turning 6 on 23rd of June. So we started in 2020, and it's really amazing to be able to see the impact and just to engage with you guys and get to know or rather learn together. So I also want to recognize our partners in Uganda. We have Mr. Herbert Zake. Herbert Zake is a Gallup certified coach, and he has coached over 500 executives. He runs an organization called Steadfast Quality Solutions, which is a HR consulting and public relations company. If you're looking to train your board members, recruit board members, or do board evaluations, then Herbert Zake and his team would be your best bet. We are also in partnership with K2 HR Services located in Rwanda. If you're looking for HR support in Rwanda, then K2 HR Services are our partners, and they'll be able to support you on that as well. Allow me to also give an opportunity to my co-host, Mr. Richard, to introduce himself. Richard.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you doing? This is Richard from Mombasa right now. I'm sure we are going to enjoy what insights that David has for us. Be sure to take your notebook and don't forget that we have Meru to go. Grace, I don't know if you have mentioned Meru.
I was going to go to it, but please go ahead.
I don't know if you have mentioned Meru.
No, you can go ahead.
Yes, Meru is going to be fun. We are going to learn about taxation and emerging issues in the employment law, right? Is that so?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have Peter Kinyanjui as one of our speakers, and we have Geoffrey Muragori, who is also a speaker. Richard?
Thank you.
All right. So, yes. And Richard, thank you very much. And do enjoy Mombasa. Excellent, excellent. Enjoy Mombasa. Enjoy your time down at the coast. And make sure you tag us along. Coast is always a plan. All right. So tonight we want to understand the balance sheet of your most critical asset. And with us is my good friend, Mr. David Segawa. He is what we call a guru on HR matters. He actually was, for the Ugandans on the call, you have seen HR Mau. David happens to be among the founders of HR Mau. So HR Mau is the IHRM of Uganda, just so that we can easily understand what that means. So he is a founding member of the Association of Human Resource Management of Uganda. And he actually has provided strategic thought leadership as a group human resource director at some of the global leading multinational organizations, including Unilever East Africa and South Africa, Standard Bank of South Africa, Coca-Cola Central, East and West and South Africa, among other organizations. And until recently, he was the group director of human resources at Equity Group Holdings. He's currently the CEO and managing partner for Trinid. Okay, you'll correct me on that one. Consulting, and he has seen transformation at country, regional, and international levels, where he has provided successful business solutions for mergers and acquisitions, target operating model design, organization effectiveness, among other things. And like I said, he's the founder and first president of the HR Mau. And he holds a master's degree in strategic human resource, among other qualifications. He's also an ICF certified coach, and he's here to unpack for us a very, very important topic. I think I heard that from him a while back, I think 2 years back, and we are lucky that he is here tonight. So David, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Grace. Always a pleasure being on the same stage with you. And thanks for your very generous introduction of me. I'm really grateful. So a very good evening to everybody on the call. I'm really, really excited to be having a conversation with some of the best minds on different subjects, including this one, I guess. And allow me to welcome you to Human Capital Accounting this evening. As you all know, Grace is never generous with time. So she's given me 30 minutes. I'll try to pitch within that time. And I believe this is not supposed to be the end of the discussion. This will be an intro to the subject, which you can always take forward at subsequent sessions. So, knowing you're very tired after a very long day, I would really want to start the conversation by asking you a question. And try to respond to it like you explained to me, like a beginner in human resources, because it's a question I've not been able to fully understand or get an answer to. I'm sure you may have better answers, but I'll make an effort to see how we make sense out of this discussion so that we end up with something to take away. But the question really is, we all know how human capital has been following the same economic logic as financial capital for the longest. Human capital has assets, and assets appreciate and depreciate. Same conversation the CFOs have. Human capital has liabilities, actually, and liabilities, as we know, they compound if they are not addressed. But I think most important, and this will be very core to the discussion we'll have, is the fact that human capital also has equity. And we know that equity normally signals organizational health. But I think a number of us on this call, especially HR practitioners, have spent a lot of time over the last several years trying to perfect your HR dashboards. And I think you've been sprinkling those dashboards with a lot of HR ratios or human capital ratios, some making a lot of sense to the boards, some maybe not. But the point is we have ratios. And so with those ratios, to a great extent, we've been able to reveal or demonstrate efficiency. So the question is, why is there no human capital line in the balance sheet? And I would like you to agree with me for now that if something is not measured, it won't be managed. we've seen this in the workplace over and over again. But we also know if it's not valued, you're basically saying it's not strategic. And so again, I ask you, is a human capital strategic? And so this begs then the discussion of the argument about the materiality of the value created by human capital. And in this regard, we talk about financial value. And I would want to avoid the rhetoric which we already see in the mission, vision statements of company to say people are our most important asset. Put that aside. I think we're talking about the materiality of that value to the extent of saying, should human capital be seen as a financial value creating asset or not? And I think that's a question which is now redundant because we have a lot of data points from a lot of research done by the big names we know, Gallup, McKinsey, BCG, Edmond, ISO, and so many others. So as far as I'm concerned, that question is really settled because there is a common thread of consistency around what all of them have been revealing to us over the years. They found out that high trust, high engagement, high safety organizations consistently outperform their peers on different lines of the balance sheet if you want, or if you want, on all those indicators of financial health, organizational health, revenue growth, operating margin, shareholder return. There is a clear evidence that you would need a high trust, high engagement, high safety organization to deliver superior results of value for your stakeholders. But let's look at these numbers, which are also very revealing if you want. We've seen from the research by BCG that 70% of transformation failures of most organizations have been linked to culture misalignment with strategy. It's never been an issue of capital shortfall. I think all these organizations have brilliant decisions at big budgets and deep pockets, at least those which were surveyed. But this is the reality. But look at this number. $1.9 trillion is the cost, annual cost that has been linked to disengagement of employees across US businesses. So unfortunately, they hadn't done this for Africa. I hope they do at some point. But I'm very sure if they do this globally, we could be talking about 3x, 4x, this amount of money. But look at this other reality. Again, I'm picking just a few of the indicators of organizational health through the lenses of human capital. 3 to 4 times the average cost of a senior specialist on leaving the organization. And how does that come about? You've invested in the individual, they have institutional memory, they've come with tons of experience from wherever they came from, and they've built it up from where you are. When they walk away with the IP, or maybe not the IPs, but institutional memory, plus all that they could have done for a longer period for you to get your return on investment, you're saying that is the level of loss you make by losing such a resource. And so the conversation and the argument then continues, because another data point actually is even more scary, that for every $1 which you see in the financial statements of most or all of the corporates, there is always a $3 to $5 which is human capital value, which goes unmeasured or unmanaged and or undervalued. That's the reality. And that creates a sense of urgency around the discussion, because we're saying the materiality of the unrecognized risk and return driver effort or lever by human capital is real, is material, is significant. And so anybody who is astute financially would want to really recognize that risk and return driver at the end of the day. And so we have a huge opportunity to reset this argument and try to bring human capital where it belongs in the balance sheet. And we have a good opportunity. I don't know how many of you have been exposed to IFRS S1 and S2, which now are becoming mandatory compliance requirements for all organizations which have obligations to report and if you want, disclose to their investors and shareholders on an annual basis as part of their financial reporting. This is actually an obligation for all the public listed companies, but all organizations which are not even public listed would definitely want to be compliant because this is best practice and it is really going to be a must do and not a nice to have. So we have some ground to start from. And so that takes me then to why have we missed the opportunity all along? What did we get wrong? Or what is it that we need to rethink and reimagine as we reposition human capital in the balance sheet? I think a couple of things. Remember when there are those hot conversations in the boardroom, especially when there are challenges around business continuity and all forms of questions around the business health, normally the board will want the CFO to really come to the podium before they call the CHRO. That could change, but I think the fact that the CFO has had a microphone for a long time, it is as well that putting the first foot in the door would require us to try as much as possible to structure the HR balance sheet in a manner that mirrors the structure the CFO uses for their daily reporting. And that makes a lot of sense because that's a language that has been established for a very long time. Why sweat it? So we are saying, therefore, that as we talk assets, whether from a human capital perspective or financial perspective, we know that the principles are the same. We're talking about the nature and decay profiling. We talk about liabilities. Again, it will be again about the three matching tiers normally the finance people use, especially for provisioning. But ultimately, the bottom line is there should be the human capital equity as the end of the equation or the outcome. And that should be showing up in the board reports or the dashboards we take to the boards as a critical metric in the balance sheet. But there is also something very important, that as many of the people and culture metrics in the balance sheet we are talking about here should be linked to a relatively close, if not matchable financial dialogue. For example, human capital return on investment, or you can call it human capital return on intangibles, should actually be kind of mirroring the return of your capital employed. But you could also argue, when we talk about internal mobility rate, and the HR colleagues here understand what we're talking about, the internal mobility, talent moving across functions, across geographies, and doing multiple things, that ideally should be mirroring what the finance guys always love to talk about, the inventory velocity. You could argue there are a lot of similarities and the implications are almost similar. But think about what we measure in the employee engagement survey, manager effective index. It is actually a lead indicator because you see much of the financial KPIs or metrics, they are normally lag indicators. But at times they also look at the lead indicators. For example, they talk about order intake to reflect what could be the trends around revenue. We can say the same thing about manager effective index. It should be an indicator for how you expect the business to perform in terms of financial outcomes over a period into the future. So huge opportunity again. No surprise, I think, to many of you. It's just that the starting was a little late, and I think there is an opportunity to fast track this. And that therefore takes me to what some of those ratios could be or are that could connect very squarely with the financial analog. And I'll talk about some of these because I think they're not really new to most of you. But when we talk about human capital return on intangibles, or in this case, you can even call it investment because you invest in training, you pay salaries, you know, in the medical facilities, benefits, etc. You also need to be demonstrating the value that comes out of the investment. It could be 1x, 2x, 3x. And you could be saying, what is the ideal benchmark in the market? Now, our financial analog could actually be return of capital employed. And so there is no difficulty there in making the correlation. But I can jump to a few. Revenue per FTE, that we know, because the finance guys will be talking about asset efficiency. If human beings here or human capabilities are assets, then you can as well talk about the efficiencies that are off. And I can go on and on and on, but I talk about manager effectiveness. And that could be a clear leading P&L indicator. But let's look at the unusual. AI augmentation readiness. Every organization is figuring out how quickly to embed AI and integrate it into the BAU. But therein lies a huge risk if you don't get that right. And it could as well be that the investment made in AI, because it is bolted on to human capital, not embedded in, built into the workforce of the future, you may not get the right return. And so the finance colleagues will then talk about CapEx return enabler, and we could as well be making that correlation. And it can go on and on. I think a number of people here will be talking about learning investment ratios. I think a number of you have talked about what is the ROI of learning. And I think this is not very far from what our finance people have been accustomed to reporting about, the research and development investment ratio. You could as well look at our learning investment ratio through the same lenses. So this kind of gives you a sense of, actually, it shouldn't be so difficult at the end of the day. We have what it takes to get human capital into the balance sheet. So why don't we unpack then these different perspectives one at a time? Let's talk about the human capital assets, and then we'll go to the liabilities. Because assets is what you own. And a number of you who are close to the human resource or human capital practice will know that all these listed on the left-hand hand of the slide are the things you talk about as your structural capital. Because you're talking about those non-physical supportive infrastructure, if you want. The things which ideally remain in the organization if employees walk out. So if I talk about knowledge infrastructure, for example, there is IPs which your employees will create. There is a lot of institutional memory, proprietary know-how, which is built as employees innovate, as employees do what they do and learn on the job. But there are also things which we know we've invested in as capital stock, because like the learning management system is actually an investment as capital stock. Ideally, we should be showcasing this as, you know, the human capital stock tier. But we're also saying, depending on which direction your investment is going, it could as well be that you need to think regeneratively, because then you need to do further investment alongside your capital accumulation or your financial returns tracking. Culture is a very interesting one, because when we talk about the trust index, and it's a number of you, I think, do these employee engagement surveys, you realize that one of the things we track is the trust index. But think about it. That has a strong correlation with the revenue per employee. And so it could as well be as the trust index goes south, your revenue per employee goes south as well. And so it would be nice to benchmark the industry and say, what is the high performance company norm? Are we doing okay or not okay? And again, I will not go through all of these, but there are some of those which one would say, David, what are you saying? Learning velocity, for example, is an asset, and we know it. Put aside the system itself, because that will be your stock. But if you're thinking about time to competence, because there's always that gap from the as easy to be, and that then should be translating into or converting into value created for the organization. The business performance gap closed, the revenue gap closed, the bottom line gap closed, the customer experience gap closed, and customer satisfaction and all those indicators. So it means, therefore, that that time to competence is something that has to be measured, tracked as stock, and you get your return demonstrated and tabulated in your dashboard. I can go on and on, but I think well-being capital, you know what I'm talking about here. Relationship capital is a very interesting one. As your salesmen interact with the customers, they're building relationship. Imagine, therefore, that there's value that you could attach to the relationship that salesman has built. Or in the bank, the relationship manager has built that ecosystem around what they do in different sectors and segments. And you could argue if they walked away, you'll have a problem. But let's assume they stay because that's the best case scenario. What is the value of the network he has built? Because there's a conversion of that network value into revenue ultimately, which goes straight into the balance sheet. And I can talk about the same thing about customer experience and the conversion into repeat purchases and all those kind of transactions, which you want to keep going. So that gives you a sense of what you own, which are your assets. But let's shift gears and talk about what you owe, because those are your liabilities, especially things which could talk to a structured deficit, because there you're actually saying that gap could put you into trouble unless you bridge it, because it starts compounding over time and eventually it destroys both the top line and the bottom line. So the skills debt. Imagine that you have a 3-year strategy and you know what the end game is supposed to be. 5x growth of the balance sheet is what is in the strategy. 10x growth in customer base is in the strategy. You know, digitization of the business to 90% self-service of customer. That is an end game in the strategy. But the capabilities, when you evaluate the competences of your workforce, or even the number of employees that would take you to the promised land, then you realize there's a gap. That skill debt could enable you, which could stop you from achieving your strategic goals, and the board will be asking you what is going on, or if it's too late, what happened. But we can tell the same thing about the culture debt. Again, I'm preaching the converted here, but there's a whole host of things which become very interesting when you look at why these should be surfaced as liabilities. Let's talk about AI displacement obligation. Everybody, as I said, is now trying to quickly crowd in AI and layer it on new IT platforms, but also, you know, reimagine your workforce with AI agents and, if you want, robotics, etc. The point is, if you will not be reskilling your workforce at the same pace as your AI aspirations, then you have a challenge. It could be legal, it could be regulatory, but you also have a problem, because from a futuristic perspective, you will have an obligation to meet or bridge the gap, especially if it's regulatory. Imagine that there are data issues, data protection issues. You're talking about all forms of risks that come with AI. That is something you may want to factor into your balance, your balance sheet as a future obligation. But I've also talked about other aspects like manager quality deficit earlier on, which again could determine whether your bottom line will come through or not, but also how you benchmark with your peers in the industry. So that, I think, brings in a very interesting conversation with our CFOs as well as the CEOs. And of course, the board will be very keen to know what this means. Because if you look, for example, the extreme right, you'll be seeing some of the elements going the wrong direction. I can already see 3 of these, which are elevated risks for that matter, and the board will be saying what they're going to do about them. For example, the skill debt. They'll be very keen about the attrition liability. They'll be very keen about the AI displacement obligation, because that's not going to go away. And you need to start thinking about provisioning for that future obligation. And so that takes me to the reality that has come to face us. Because even as we try to manage the business as usual, we also are conscious of the reality of the future of work, the future workforce, and the future workplace. And all those bring in interesting dynamics, much as they are interconnected. But we know, for example, and I don't want to belabor the point about AI, but AI and human collaboration as an index becomes a very critical balance sheet item, which will have to be measured to the future. Because if you think about it, if you had the AI running on its own and the workforce running on its own, you'll get 1 + 1 = 2. But one would expect that the workforce augmented with AI should probably be 4 times more productive. So you get a 1 + 1 = 5 effect. That one would want to be tracking. And that makes a lot of financial value. But again, we can talk about skills liquidity score. What is the agility of your staff to move from one job to another, especially if one disappears? How quickly can you redeploy them so that they can continue to add value and strategically so? And I can talk about the future workplace. I think there are things we can talk about there, the presence dividend, because you're increasingly having employees, especially when you start talking about virtual working and in-person working, etc. But there are also issues around the future workforce, because then you start talking about longevity, for example, because we've been told for a very long time that, oh, you know, when people overstay is a problem. Economies like the US, but it's also catching up even in Africa, we realize that actually phased retirement, for example, having senior interns, bringing the alumni, etc., there is a way they create value instead of being seen as a liability. But you can say the same thing about skills obsolescence. Actually, you could start saying that your human capital as an asset is depreciating as the skills they hold become obsolescent, in which case then the board could task you to starting to provision for your workforce or whatever portion of it, which will become obsolescent. So in which case then you need to say, so what is the story about human capital depreciation, appreciation, and the provision as required? And so that takes us to then the end game, because like a financial balance sheet, you'll be saying you'll have your assets and liabilities, and the delta between the two will give you the equity. In our case, like I've articulated in the prior slides, you'd ideally be saying you would want to be growing your asset at a faster rate than your liabilities, because the ultimate is your human capital equity becomes a strategic value that makes a big difference in terms of your organization health. One would want to tell the board that, hey, you know what? When we benchmark against peer organizations, we're happy to actually say and report that our human capital equity is more than 2 times, the annual payroll, and that's really a health organization, but you could also say the other way around would be suggesting that you are really vulnerable strategically. And so I think it comes down to saying, how do we then institutionalize the measurement of what really matters? And how do we align with the CFOs so we not only speak the same language, but we have shared dashboards, we have shared and aligned metrics that could comfortably talk to the balance sheet, so that we can have this line coming in at some point. And I think it will come sooner than later, because the pressure is on to do that. But we are also saying, I think there's room for starting to provision for the human capital liabilities you've seen, from skill debt to attrition and taxation gaps, and we start saying, and therefore, what would it take and what decisions need to be made by the boards, because these are the conversations that you want to be having. And you would really want to get the CF on your side when we came to this discussion, because they would love to be championing this discussion. Why not? It will make their balance sheets look better. But remember, I also told you that when we go to IFRS S1 and S2, we have an opportunity now to demonstrate to the investor shareholders that beyond the financials, we are actually showing the whole triple bottom line, coming through their reporting, sustainability or ESG coming in for the bottom line, one of the bottom line elements, because the triple bottom line, yeah? Profit, balance, and people. And we know for sure that all these agendas around DEI, agendas around pay equity, especially between men and women, and all these issues around work environment, workplace rights, the UN Global Compact, etc., the right of association, all these things will have to be reported in the IFRS S1 and S2, but very importantly, bringing them now into the balance sheet language and bring this out to the investor shareholders. It will probably assure them more about the governance aspects of the organization, more than the numbers. Profit is what it is. It is a rear view mirror, but if you get these lead indicators coming through the human capital balance sheet, you are actually assuring the investor shareholders that they are investing in the right organization. And so I'm running out of time, but I should be wrapping up very quickly. So all said and done, you cannot talk balance sheet, you cannot talk about sustainably creating and delivering stakeholder value if you don't apply the enterprise risk management framework. It's very important that, just like for all aspects of the business, we have risk registers and human capital risk registers, human capital, if you want, we normally would want to map these on a heat map of sorts, so that people get a sense of how high is specific human capital risk and how low, if you want, what's the likelihood, that's very important, and very importantly, the impact on the business. Just on this slide, just putting out there some of those elements which you would want to see as they relate to the balance sheet of human capital. You can see all the way from onboarding failure, coming down to benefits gap. You can take it to the extreme right, AI displacement obligation, which I talk about. But we have issues around, for example, talent market shock. We have really issues about key person risk. Let me explain that, for example. There's organizations, and this is real, where you'll find 40% of the value, 40% of the workforce is delivering 60% of the value of the organization. So you have a problem because the 40% employees, if they leave, that's a key person risk. For some organizations, it's even worse. You may have only maybe 10, 30% creating real strategic value. The others are just, accompanying the game. But I think the real issue here becomes, how do you get the board to appreciate some of these risks and get a sense of the mitigation plans you're putting in place? And how then will this translate into balance sheet health and optimization? So this, I think, is something most of the HR folks know, but I put there a number of things which I think you will want to deal with eventually. Lastly, I think just to tease out some of the assumptions we've been having. Important to stress test some of this because there are a lot of myths that we've been creating, especially over time, and we're being proven wrong. For example, I think when we've been talking with the CFOs, we've tried to make it look as if headcount is the primary workforce unit. But now AI is going to change that. So we'll be talking different sources of outputs. But secondly, is L&D really an operating cost? Isn't it a capital expenditure? Or attrition? Is it liability? No. If I get poor performers out of the organization, that is an asset, it's not a liability. I'm doing a favor to the organization and protecting value. I can talk about culture as intangible, but I can also measure the direct correlation of culture with employee net promoter score, the velocity of staff, the of movement within, values, behavior gap, decision of the quality of decision making, etc. And I can go on and on. Look at well-being. Is it a welfare cost? Isn't it a productivity asset? I think we need to rethink some of these. But that, I think, is really where we come to say, so what? Is it something that can be helpful to reimagine and rethink how we've been positioning human capital with the boards in working closely with our CFO colleagues, with our CEOs, and all the colleagues in the organization, because ultimately there is the opportunity to get this right once and for all. I'll stop there and I will be taking question. Thank you. Back to you, Grace.
Yes, amazing, amazing, amazing. I was just listening to you and thinking it's been a while since we actually got technical on HR, eh? And I think thank you for reminding us that our game can be higher, just depending on how we look at things. And I can see the emojis here, the love, the celebratory, the claps. This was really, really interesting, and especially for those who are looking to take their game to the next level. So we are inviting you to ask the questions here, but we have one from Liz who says, can you explain for me how we can balance the balance sheet when companies are getting losses in profit? Employees are always sacrificed as the key costs. So how do we protect them and defend employees as an asset, but not as a risk?
Okay. Can I take it?
Yes.
That is exactly the reason for this discussion. Why would it be that it is easier for the CFO to cut the training budget, to reduce employees or headcounts in a scenario where they need to optimize their balance sheet? First, in the balance sheet, the only thing that shows up that kind of slightly connects or likely connect to the employees is operating expenditure, and to some extent, the cost-to-income ratio. And when they unpack the cost, they say, oh my gosh, HR cost to total OPEX is 40%. But there's no one thinking about why. Why is the business labor intensive? But because we also are not able to tell the productivity story through the lenses of this balance sheet, using the KPIs or metrics which mirror what the CFOs capture in the balance sheet, then we already lost the game before we even start the discussion. Imagine if you flip this around, and when that discussion around balance sheet optimization and restructuring of the balance sheet, not people yet, we get to the point of, let's look at all the assets, we look at the people and we look at the productivity and how that would convert into faster growth of the top line, because there are these new skills we are putting value to, and skills of the future to fast track against competition. And these are translating superior customer value creation and eventually shareholder. Then we start having a good debate, because ultimately it may not be the people to be let go. It could as well be that the business model needs to be rethought. And in most cases, that's the case. Maybe we shouldn't be going to that market in the first instance. Maybe we should throw out that product, because it's a volume game, but the strategy and the business model is aligned to a value game. So this is where we need to get deeper into the metrics I've talked about and in this balance sheet. So we need to become friends with the CFOs to have this conversation and immerse them.
And yeah, I mean, sometimes, yeah, anyway, like you're saying, we get to be friends with the CFOs. So probably my other question is the other budget that we find, or rather the language, like you've just spoken to us, a lot of HRs keep asking, how do we justify our reason for being, which is technically everything, but there are some when, for example, preparing for board reports, and especially in an organization that's not talking profit, what are some of the things we can use to measure assets? I speak to public sector, I speak to PBOs and FBOs.
Yes. So I think it boils down to positioning people as a business. It doesn't matter whether you're in a non-profit. I've worked in some of these. I may not talk bottom line. No, I won't talk profit, but I'll talk about impact. Whether you are working on gender justice, climate justice, or universal health, etc. It comes down to what is the story about the impact of people, the value add, and therefore positioning people as a business. We're in a people business. And therefore, what's the return on intangibles or the return on investment in people? And how does it translate into, may not be tangibles like profits, because in NGOs you don't have a bottom line, but it could be qualitative. It could be the brand image. It could be the social license to operate, especially in NGOs. You're talking about the socioeconomic bottom of the socioeconomic pyramid. What is happening there, and what are the employees doing? Their social capital, their network value, the impact, the influence on policy reforms which government, will pass through. These are things we can measure. How many policies have been reformed because your NGO has played a very activist role to drive agendas? But I could say the same thing about public service. It's about the impact. Government has business to perform. Never mind that may not be again delivering the bottom line as such. But why would this ministry remain standing and the other one get sacrificed? Ultimately comes to the social value, the social good, and that has to be measured through the lenses of human capital value add.
But so I'm just wondering, so for example, if you're measuring the tenure, like you talked about institutional memory and everything, how do we measure, like, for example, if somebody has been in an organization for 10 years, how do we measure that as an asset, or is it as an asset?
So there are two perspectives there. Number one, there is the learning agility of that individual, irrespective of the tenure, their ability to hook into new strategic agendas and moving them forward. But two, it could as well be that they have a lot of institutional memory that by the internal transfer of learning, you're talking about learning organizations, these individuals are valued assets to the extent of business continuity. And we've seen those people who say, Grace is indispensable. Practically not indispensable, but you're saying for as long as this agenda is still in play, that is your subject matter expert who creates, innovates, and transfers knowledge in the organization. That would ideally be the case. And that's why you're getting the senior interns coming back into organizations and alumni who left because of their institutional memory and subject matter expertise, which is unique.
Yeah. Very interesting. I'm trying to see whether we have a question on the chat, or shall I continue with mine? Good evening, David. Another question. Yeah?
There is a hand which has been up forever. Yoweri Magumba.
Oh, Yoweri from Uganda. Let me allow to talk. Yoweri, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Go ahead, your hand is up.
Oh, hello, Grace. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Sorry for leaving my hand up, but I'm just going to forward my question in the chat box. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yoweri. Thank you. All right, so there's another question I was about to read. Let me just check. What is the impact of training in relation to our balance sheet, considering the training impact takes time? This helps us address budget cuts on training.
Yeah, so I could have a long answer and I could have a very short one. You saw one of the metrics I was calling the learning ROI, and I brought it up both as an asset, but could also be a liability. Now, why it becomes a critical asset is to demonstrate that if I have a business strategy, let me give you what I mentioned. You in your strategy or business plans for 2027, you want to double the balance sheet, or you want to increase the customer base from 10 million to 20 million. You want to move the needle from point A to point B. The bridging of the gap from point A to point B, from the Z to B, is what is value added through learning. And that's why in one of the metrics I was showing, it was the speed of bridging the gap or converting the skills learned into business value. And in the learning value chain, if you're confident with it, you actually start the value chain by evaluating the business leaders or business owners to say, what is the current reality in terms of sales, for example, in terms of number of customers we are reaching, in terms of the beneficiaries of this social program, and what numbers do we want to achieve in a year's time, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time? And then we start saying, and therefore let's define the gap and what are the causes of the gap. Some of them could be skill gaps, others could be engagement gaps, benefits, motivation gaps. It could be tools of trade gaps. Now, when we zero down on the learning gap, that is leading to the business performance gap, then we translate it into the learning intervention. Then you go all the way to evaluating the impact of that. Then you deliver the training. When you are done with the training, you need to go back and evaluate what has shifted ever since we delivered that learning. And that goes back to the metrics I shared. Because by closing the loop down to the learning value chain, you need to go back to demonstrate, did we move the needle or not? And the needle could have moved because salaries were increased, not because people got new skills. So you need to go back to the script. What was the gap attributed to training? And that, to be continued. It's a long conversation, as I say.
Yeah, and I think we have covered a question on ROI for training, return on investment. I think it was done by my Nigerian friend. I'm forgetting her name. Richard, you remind me her name. Oh God, Oracle, Sandra the Oracle. She did a session on ROI. You can also combine David's answer with that session. Will we receive the recording for this session? Yes. If you're on our WhatsApp group, you can join and it will be shared there. Yes, somebody needs to sit down and actually understand these mathematics. So somebody is saying, good evening, David. This is from Yoweri. Thanks for this wonderful presentation. However, how can I measure the impact of AI on human capital depreciation or appreciation?
Fantastic. Very quickly, you see, AI is supposed to augment the workshop to enhance the productivity of the employees. For example, if the employees in your HR team, we are spending most of the time doing transactional work and dealing with the employees walking in, and the AI is layered on the HR information system, and now 80% of the HR queries are resolved through either somebody logging a ticket and the bot responding, or self-service. And so you're already saying, even without reducing the employees in your team, that employee now is focusing on more tactical and strategic value add things which really contribute to customer experience and the revenue and bottom line enhancements, in which case then the value of that employee becomes 2x, 3x, 4x. So the point is, AI should enable productivity enhancement and efficiencies. So you get more from less. You will not add more employees, but the few you have will be doing bigger, more strategic value-adding things at a rate of maybe 5 times what they were doing before. That's the point of AI. If AI cannot demonstrate that value add, if you cannot have a target of productivity and multiply, and that's why you HR people need to know, the productivity measures are going to change drastically. The dashboards are going to change with AI now, because the drivers, the input KPIs and outcome KPIs are going to be different.
Yeah, I hope that answers Yoweri's question. What is your WhatsApp group? Please add me. The link has been shared there. Maybe Jacinta, you can also share again. Let me just confirm you have shared to all. Yeah, you shared to everyone, but you can share it again, and you can be able to access that. Now, David, what kind of mindset do we need to switch for HRs to start thinking like you, like seeing this as so that we can move from looking at HR as a cost center rather than a value add? How do we change this mindset?
Mindset is, first of all, to manage HR as a business, which means you need to be able to demonstrate value creation through the lenses of the business. That's it. That's it. If you don't want to call it return on investment, call it return on intangibles, but be able to measure what our return is. ultimately the boardroom can only listen to somebody who can say, one, you can demonstrate what the return was, but two, from a risk mitigation perspective, and that's why the enterprise risk management framework is important, is to be able to have not only a risk register, but for you to be able to say, we have these things we are doing in human capital, which are leading indicators, which can point to a health business of now, of tomorrow, and after tomorrow. And these are the 5 levers which the board needs to either invest in or make some tough decisions about. That is managing business.
Yeah, and I mean, we've come a long way, and I know we are going places. But I think it's a call to action for all of us to really think broadly and think like business people, not just paper pushers. I think that has been said. In fact, my friend and I were talking the other day, and we're like, I do not want to hear people talking about strategic HR again. I mean, if you are not there yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. This has been a conversation for the last 10 or so years, really. There's need for, now we start putting, things into perspective and into action. And I hope that this session has brought that joy to you. Now, before I ask David to give his parting shot, we have an event coming up as he takes a breath. We have an event coming up this Friday. We are going to be in what do we call it? We are going to be in Meru on Friday from 4 o'clock. We have an amazing session lined up for you. I'm just trying to get the flyer. Where is the share screen? My God. Where are you? Why can't I see the screen? What? I don't seem to. I thought my photo is open. Let me see. Right. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so like I was saying, we are going to Meru this Friday, and we have Mr. Peter Kinyanjui, who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. If you don't know Peter, you need to rethink your life. He's one of the best legal minds we have in the country, and especially in the areas of employee relations. And we will be also having a conversation around taxation with Geoffrey Muragori. We are going to be learning about the current taxes, because the taxman is after us. Not just as employees, but also as business owners. So if you know anyone in Meru, please throw this to their side and encourage them to come. And we shall be happy to host them and just interact and get to know what they're up to. So yeah, David, what is your parting shot?
Parting shot is, I think, as business leaders, you need to quickly connect with the emerging trends, and which are moving really fast, because these are now the boardroom conversations. And you'll be very sad if you business leaders are not hooked in early enough. These are, one, sustainability and ESG. The other one I can mention is data and AI and all the risks and opportunities which go with that element. And of course, there's data protection, all those things, which are a huge problem, by the way, through people and cover. And then there's cyber. So there are some of those trends which, if you are not ahead of the curve, you will be left behind. And this time, you'll never catch up. Just to encourage you, keep up with the trends as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And thank you for challenging us. I can see the people on the chat are saying, great insights, David. Thank you. Maria is saying, thank you so much for the presentation. Maria from Namibia, thank you so much. I saw somebody also who logged in from Thailand. Thank you for joining us as well. So thank you, and I hope that this was impactful for you. Yes, you can pass the love, the claps, the celebrations to David. Always a pleasure, David. You are one mind that I enjoy listening to. And we hope that we can now go and implement and just get to share some of these lessons that we are learning from you. So thank you very much, and we look forward to interacting with you some more and learning from you as well. So thank you so much. And you guys, thank you very much, our audience, for joining us. Please follow us on Instagram, Tara Solutions, like our Facebook page at Tara Solutions, connect with us on LinkedIn at Tara Solutions, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Get It Right with the Tara Solutions. That is where this recording will be uploaded, but we will always share them in the groups as well, so you can access the link. But make sure you also leave a comment while at it. And I don't know whether you can, David, you're David Sagawa on LinkedIn, right? Just David Sagawa.
Yes, it is. I'm David Sagawa, yes.
Yeah, so you can also connect with David Sagawa on LinkedIn so that this conversation can keep going. So thank you very much, guys. And it's always a pleasure. See you next Tuesday for yet another amazing session where we shall be discussing another topic of interest for you and yours. At this point in time, I wish you the very best. Have a lovely night and a blessed week ahead. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Richard, enjoy Mombasa.
You just believe. You will when you believe. Love, there's only you in my life, the only thing that's right. My first love, yeah. Your every breath I take, your every step I make, and I want to share